Hello and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast. I'm Ivanka Magic.
And my name is Michael Forrest. And this week, what are we talking about?
This week we're mostly having opinions on data.
Data is the subject this week, but before we get on to that...
Yes.
Tell me about your flipping week, Ivanka.
My week has been... I think it's been okay. It goes so fast. Where does it go? What happens?
Mine are going fast now. I was worried because for a while it was a real slog, my work days. I was just feeling every hour. But this week has been a bit back into that cycle of just like, you know, you just kind of come to at the other end of the day and it's like, okay, that's done.
Yes, my week has been like that. It's been worky.
You haven't even been working, though.
No, but I've been working a lot on restaurantsbrighton.co.uk.
Oh, is that a little hobby project that you're doing?
No, that is not a hobby project. That is how we pay the bills around here.
Wow. From a website?
From a website, indeed.
Well, what's the point of a website?
Oh, it gives people information about things. So yes, I've been doing that. And then I went to meet with the Brighton and Hove Food Partnership, who I'm not sure if they're a charity or one of those social enterprises, actually. I must check. But anyway, they do things about helping people around Brighton eat, those who can't. So, and they also help by providing cookery courses and gardening projects and a thing called the Casserole Club, which is a way of combating loneliness more than food, but via the medium of food. So if you have a spare portion of food once a month, once a week, once every couple of weeks, they pair you with somebody who's socially isolated and you take them round some dinner and have a chat with them, maybe eat with them, maybe just have a cup of tea and a chat. So it's nice. So they do things like that. So we were looking at how we could help them. So volunteering our professional skills to help a local charity.
Well, check you out.
Check
That's
us
pretty
out.
Important stuff.
With my halo.
Loneliness is a problem.
It is a big problem.
For everyone.
In society.
Except for rich, famous people.
Is it?
With loads of money and
But
who are
they're not
famous.
lonely.
They're not lonely and they have no problems. So we should all aspire
That's
to
the
be
truth.
like them.
Yes, we should all be like them.
If
not
only I
lonely.
had more sports cars, then I would be truly not alone.
Is that what you need? Can you drive?
No, I had one driving lesson last year in an effort to get started, but then I haven't managed to pick it up again. I've got a provisional driving licence, which I think was a pretty good step. It's now got the wrong address on it because I've moved since, so I guess I need to update that. I've had a 2-hour session, so I'm pretty much there. I can go round a certain area, turning left the whole time, going over speed bumps over and over again. So I'm pretty much, I think, halfway there probably.
I've been reading this book called something like The Body Holds the Score, The Body Keeps Score or something, and it's about how trauma affects you physically.
Emotional trauma or trauma?
Emotional trauma.
Yeah.
How emotional trauma physically affects your brain and
gives
therefore
you
your
the
will-being.
hives. It gives you the hives.
It gives you the hives, and it does things like. So I'm very early into the book, but I've been reading interesting things about how medicating mental illness. These are kind of things we've touched upon or alluded to or investigated in our own lives, but so using chemicals to treat mental illness or the symptoms of mental illness doesn't really necessarily address the underpinning issues that have caused those mental illnesses, and it's quite interesting.
Yeah, base case scenario with that is it gives you a little bit of a leg up to start trying to deal with your problems, but certainly it's easy to become dependent on the chemical, isn't it?
Or one of the interesting examples that this guy, this psychiatrist dude gives, whose name obviously I haven't got in my head because I don't do that kind of thing.
I'll yell it over.
You yell it later.
Here, right here. Hold on.
Michael Gilbo.
There we go. Now we know.
The guy was giving stats on how a lot of the stats that he uses are American stats, but it's about sort of children in care are X amount higher percentage likely to be prescribed with medication to address behaviour But the problem with a lot of the never mind that, even putting that to one side, the medication to address the behaviour makes them less likely to be curious, interested, engaged in society, which therefore makes it even less likely that they will learn the skills required to be an adult and to be a contributing member of society. So they're sort of medicated out of useful existence.
To experience life, don't you? Or
yeah, you do.
What the heck?
Rather than, I can understand if you are, like you say, as a grown up struggling with depression, for example, using drugs to help you get up in the morning, to have the energy to go to a therapy session. But that's very different to a child who's not yet got a fully formed brain or a fully formed set of emotions. So it's quite, though I'm making it sound really depressing, and it's not joyful, but it's not depressing. It's interesting to look at these things, I think.
Go a bit easy. Get ready for a gulp, guys. There we go. I have to edit out a lot of those usually. She doesn't usually go.
That was my turmeric tea. That's my new fad of the week.
I mean, come on.
It's actually a very nice beverage.
My favourite.
Go on.
My favourite is Celestial Seasonings, and I would recommend having it in a huge mug because a tea bag goes a long way. It's very tasty.
Celestial Seasonings.
Yeah, it's got a picture of a tiger on it, and it's the most tasty herbal tea we've found.
Wow, that is a high praise indeed. My new fad of the week is a cup of yellow with a bit of pepper.
Well, speaking of yellow, my week was characterised...
I never ask you how you are.
My week was very much characterised by my 24-hour urine collection.
Oh, Jesus.
Which is 48 hours of collecting your own urine in a big bottle, 2 big bottles. So
did this encourage you to drink more or less water?
You were supposed to just drink the normal amount. I drank the normal amount. But yeah, so I'm finally free of... So I couldn't really range very far from the house for a couple of days, just in case, nature called. And yeah, so I've had a little jug and then been pouring it into a big jug. And it's a whole thing. I was wondering how I was going to get them because the hospitals that I have to deliver them to is in Hammersmith, and I've been worried because they're big bottles, 2.5 litre bottles. I mean, about like a half full, a third to a half full now. And I was wondering about how I was going to get them in. I thought I was going to have to take a taxi or something, but in the end, I elected to. I've got this very tall backpack, so I cycled the 25-minute journey into Hammersmith, which is where my studio also is, so it was quite convenient for that, with 2 bottles of piss on my back. When they came out, they were a bit frothy due to being shaken up in my bag. Ivanka's like, why are you talking about this?
It's a great story.
It's just it's slightly humiliating, slightly undignified. The ongoing saga of... No, we just need you to, for 2 full days, collect every wee you do. Okay, sounds good. But I got them in and he said I was A-OK, so which is a great improvement from the first time I handed over a urine sample in this saga when it was described as not good urine. So we're getting there. We're getting there, people. We're getting there. I'm going to be better. And I slugged back 3 vitamin D pills this morning. Apparently you can have 3 at once a week. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm going to be so full of flipping vitamins. It's unbelievable.
So you don't have to take them every day?
No, apparently it's not like vitamins. I guess that the body can store vitamin D, but I'll have to Google that.
You'd imagine it would. Otherwise, how could you become...
Well, you can't store vitamin C, so... And that's just one down. It's the one before. So...
I'm not sure that that's how it works, Michael.
What?
If they're in alphabetical order, they have similar behaviours. No. I mean, but the vitamin D thing, you think you're supposed to sort of sunbathe in summer and that's supposed to keep you going through the winter, so therefore you must be able to store it.
Well, there we go.
Stands to reason.
The only other thing was we finished off Jessica Jones at the weekend, which I will recommend.
Oh, really?
After series 1 was absolutely just phenomenal. But one of the things that was great about it was how brilliant the villain was, as a sort of like person who's very powerful and sort of misogynistic, but not cackling, I am evil. They're just like, what? They're just sort of very casually ruining people's lives because they're so powerful. They just don't, but they're just not really thinking about it. And they're just kind of breezing through and being very charming. And it's David Tennant plays this guy, what's his name? Dr. Kilgrave. It's a very silly name. But I thought the first series was so defined by the brilliant interaction between Jessica Jones and the villain who was then not in the second series. I was a bit worried that it wasn't going to, it was going to lose that magic. But they do. The writing is just, they do a really great job of following where the story needs to go and what the characters need to do and where they are. So even if initially you're like, oh, why are we talking about this? You're like, oh, well, yeah, I guess that's like high priority for this character right now. And you stick with it, and then it like really pays off really excitingly, and it gets very good. So as superhero things go, I think it's the best Marvel villain. Like series 1 of Jessica Jones is probably the best Marvel thing I've seen.
Wow.
It's pretty brutal as well. It's pretty violent.
I'm sure I watched a bit of Jessica Jones. I didn't really get into it.
Well, I can't recommend it. Well, like the first episode, 2/3 of the way through, like there's this creepy moment where like you sort of see the silhouette of this guy kind of come in and just like really creepily just lick the side of her face and then sort of disappear. And I'm like, okay, that was kind of awesomely so creepy and weird that I've definitely got to watch this with Sharon. Like, this is not something I'm going to watch on my own. So I kind of rewatched it. You could just tell like this is something else. This is something a bit different because that's not what you usually have the bad guys do in a creepy scene. But yeah, big fan of the writing on that, and recommend it.
What I thought you were going to say when you described your misogynist villain.
Yes.
I thought you were going to say, and this is a beautiful segue into the Cambridge Analytica story of the week.
What we're talking about this week is data. And in the wake of, how long have we been talking about Cambridge Analytica now? Like a year?
Year or so.
Over a year?
Yeah.
And we've been waiting, and it still hasn't really hit the news. And when I talked about it, I felt like I was... Like when you describe it, you feel like you're a kind of conspiracy theorist or something. It's so such a big thing, and it's so kind of under the radar. But then the fact you could look at their website and see them talking about what they've done in public. It's been amazing that it's taken so long for this to catch up, for this to be on the news. And yeah, the whistleblower was very important. So you wanted to take the misogyny, tie into that. Are you talking about
just
the
your
camera?
Description of the villain, I think. The idea that it's like, instead of being a cackling villain, it's sort of the complete lack of empathy for society, for the world. That's what I think is most remarkable about this. The things we've read and seen is this sort of, of course we'll just do that. We'll just manipulate an election that affects millions, hundreds of millions of people. Why not?
Just do it because we can, and have absolutely no conscience about it. Well, apparently this person, was it Steve Bannon that said, like, to change society first you have to break it? Or was it the Cambridge Analytica person?
I don't know.
Like, but that's, they just decided, okay, we're going to break society, and they're doing a pretty good job of it. Because I didn't know about the data breach. I just knew they were, they were capturing users' psychometric data with those little silly kind of questionnaires that you get, I'm a this and that. And they were just kind of consolidating data and cross-referencing data collected from those silly so watch out for those anything that starts kind of psychoanalyzing you, because that's probably connected to something a lot more manipulative and a lot darker. And also, when you see these little ads in your Facebook feed, like, that could have been targeted at just you.
It's just so creepy.
And this is the thing. It's so underground and it's so behind the scenes. Like, because it's so much a personal experience of, I'm seeing this. And they created content. They had a huge team of people creating video content, websites, blogs, news sites that would then, you'd sort of click through from something you saw on Facebook and you'd just end up kind of going down a rabbit hole of fake made up content designed to manipulate you into a certain, into behaving a certain way.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible.
It is incredible.
And I wish I could see some of this content, but none of us can see the content anyone else was getting shown. And I think they probably, and it's nice to think that, they couldn't have targeted me because I'm too, intellectually conscious. I don't know, but, think how many people just quietly gone on these little rabbit hole things, not really realising that it's content that's been tailor-made to change the way they see things. Yeah.
It's crazy. Because, this idea, there's lots of things under this story, really. There is privacy, there is sort of manipulation, there is, is it corruption? That sort of manipulation from that high level on a grand scale. What is that?
Well, someone was paying for it. They were charging millions of pounds, millions of dollars. It was getting paid for.
It wasn't, they didn't do it for altruistic reasons. It was a business.
They did it for money, yeah.
They did it for cash. So there's all these kind of just because manipulation is not new. Advertising is manipulation. There's every little bit of a party political broadcast. Every single one of those things is an attempt to manipulate you into changing your view or confirming your views. So that's not new.
But that's a shared reality. That's everyone gets to see the same adverts. And so now we don't have a shared reality anymore. We just have.
That is the fucked up thing.
Yeah.
That is what's weird. Because there was an article rolling around at some point. It's like, what's the difference? And I'm sure we reference it. The sort of difference between a liberal person's approach to life and a conservative person's approach to life. And there's this kind of fundamental fear response that people who are of a liberal mindset are simply less fearful of the world, and therefore they're less on an offensive. So the response to things will not be kill and maim; it will be help. Whereas, I think that I read this article. Maybe it was fake news to support my way of thinking. Who knows?
Just like you're right. You're right,
Ivanka. Yes, you are lovely, Ivanka.
Who knows? Who can say?
Who knows? So I'll dig it out and we can decide for ourselves. But to think that two members of the same family would be logging onto Facebook, and getting angry about completely different things, or in fact the same thing but differently presented. That is just what's totally fucked up about this.
And it's just amazing that they made it work, though, as well, because there's nothing to say that this strategy would necessarily work, but they worked all right.
Well, they're not lacking in cleverness. It's just whether you want to spend your cleverness doing. There was a Cambridge researcher involved. There was some clever people.
And I got into a conversation on Twitter with, because after Brexit, I just didn't understand who, I knew that, a lot of people were voting out of ignorance and sort of racism and, and the bus and all this, but I was like, but there must be some, but I finally found someone, the people using big data to, and using Facebook to do things. I got into a conversation with this one guy. I will have to track down his name. It was actually Dominic Cummings, the director of the Leave campaign. He talked a lot about running this big data campaign as part of the Leave campaign. And again, they were doing similar things. And I think Cambridge Analytica was part of it as well.
Yeah, I think they were.
Yeah, but I asked him why he did it. And his response was he was like a smart guy. And I was like, well, why do you want this? And his response was, it was to do with the EU is too slow and it can't react to change quick enough. And it's about sort of control and feedback being kind of screwed up in this kind of, as you get a larger organisation, and he wanted a sort of smaller, more fast-moving thing, which he kind of said that Europe couldn't do. But their team had very little patience for Farage or anyone like that, because they would just sort of spout stuff off and kind of run around, whereas they were doing the real work of actually kind of systematically making this change. But the grotesque thing about that is, okay, well, make that the campaign.
Don't make it about racism and getting rid of immigrants and, But nobody made that argument. That argument wasn't made like that at all by anybody. No. It's that even the left that have strong arguments about free trade versus fair trade, those arguments weren't being made. If you want to be so on the left and the right, but what you're saying, his argument isn't really left or right.
No, not at all.
It's got nothing to do with that. It's to do with the machine of the EU.
Yeah. And it may be it may be very valid. And that's, I'd be interested to sort of find out. But the fact that you're not using that as your campaign is the horrible thing about all this.
And that makes it doubtful that is a valid argument. Because if it were a valid argument, then surely you could use it to win an argument,
Well, but it's too complex, isn't it? It's too complex to explain to your average person, so you kind of make the campaign about racism instead, about kind of xenophobia.
And fuck who has to pay the price.
Yeah.
It's that lack of conscience that is freaky. Ooh, just not freaky. Freaky makes it sound like it's some sort of...
The word
picture.
We need the word like insidious.
Yeah.
I don't want to say disgusting. I don't want to say grotesque. I don't want to say it's
evil.
It's basically evil, isn't it?
It is. It's basically evil.
You're using people as pawns for your own whatever reasons they are, and probably you're not actually going to get to follow through on those reasons. But also, it's just like an experiment, isn't it? And it's just
on
no
a
empathy.
Massive scale.
What can we do?
But manipulating people isn't new. Treating the citizens, the citizens, treating your citizens, treating your fellow humans as pawns for your game is not a new thing. The powerful have always done it. The church has always done it. The powerful have done it via the church. These are not new things.
Well, and the church has done it via,
via powerful people. It's kind of a symbiotic relationship.
I think the church sits above politics in terms of power. And if you want to see that, really beautifully done, watch the end of season 2 of Angel. I think the Buffy the Vampire Slayer spin-off has a wonderful kind of church state. They go to an alternative, they go to another dimension where our vampire character comes in, and now in this dimension he can like walk around in the daylight and he's having a great time. And our female sort of lead, Cordelia, kind of ends up in this sort of ritualized kind of royal pairing, and then she's going to be a princess and sort of rule things, and you sort of see them kind of doing the machinations of the sort of the theatre of power, but of course that's all being done by these kind of monks behind the scenes who are actually kind of like hold all of the knowledge and are using their kind of like, because religion, if you have God on your side, if you have a religion is the most powerful, because you're the one that's in touch with the guy that's running everything, that's in control of the universe. This isn't about countries, this is about nature. I know the guy that made all of this, so you shut up, king of one country, prime minister of one little country.
Yeah, true.
Anyway, that was a bit of a confused tangent, but I just wanted to bring in something a bit like,
Befuddled is a good word.
Not necessarily the right word, but
but it's a good one. I can't help in these circumstances, though, this idea that people can't possibly understand the complicated argument of the EU needs to be more nimble, or whatever your
that was about it.
That was about it. It's like, so people are too stupid for that, so let's give them things. I don't like that argument. I hate that argument. It's like, and going to my usual fallback of children and parents versus, society and government and citizens, or it's like, you have a choice, even though I just don't believe people can't understand, is my point. If somebody's asking me a question, I will answer the actual question instead of saying, no, you can't possibly understand. So therefore, look, it's about cheese. It's about bendy bananas. fucking bendy bananas or straight bananas or whatever that bullshit is. And the irony of a lot of this is that with this new general data protection GDPR law coming in May,
right,
that's designed to protect us all from this kind of data manipulation. You will have the right to be forgotten. You will have the right that anybody collecting data about you will have to have your explicit consent and be very clear on what that data is going to be used for. And that's a law that's coming from the EU. The EU has looked at how to protect all of its citizens.
So why do we have the cookie protection rule? What is the danger of being online and sharing your data? I would summarize it as, if people can start connecting your activity between different websites, then they can start to really get inside your head. So what those cookie rules are about is to make it very difficult technically to have your information, to have your activity on one website leak into another website. Something that really undermines that is, as soon as someone sticks a Facebook like button embed into their page, now Facebook has access to all of that information about your behavior across loads and loads of websites. And the same with Google. Every time you click a link, it add to its understanding of your behavior, as well as most websites have Google Analytics integrated. So Google have an awful lot of data on your web browsing behavior. And then the other person that's in a very powerful position is your ISP, is your internet provider, because they could just collect everything. And actually now they are by law. Which is dark as well.
Which is very dark. And again, it's gone through quietly.
Yeah, that was a shocking thing that just happened, and now that's real. So basically, the police have access to everything you've ever looked at, all your porn, all of those pornography decisions. Doesn't matter if you're in private browsing. I mean, that's going in the database. Yes, but the thing about that data is there's an awful lot of it, and it's called big data for a reason, is that it's sort of not necessarily that actionable. You don't necessarily, drawing conclusions from it is not necessarily that trivial. I looked at the GDPR website last week, just to try and understand that, and I just couldn't make sense of what it was actually. What it was.
I mean,
so do you have a bit
the
of an understanding
reality
on that?
is with the same thing of like the cookie protection, is that what nobody's addressed is the interaction models that will make anybody actually read the consent that they have to give. Like, we're all in a massive, massive habit of going clickety-click, yes, I agree, clickety-click, whatever. Yeah, cookies, just give me the website. I want to buy shoes. So we're not really how that GDPR will actually be executed in terms of interaction models is a whole different kettle of fish, I think. It's all very well coming up with it as a law, but making sure, being able to prove that consent was truly given is, I think they've gone a bit too, I think it'll be really hard. Everybody who's ever clicked, yes, I agree to terms and conditions, having not read the terms and conditions, which is everyone, frankly. Except obviously some of our former colleagues at Canonical who truly do read all the terms and conditions, but you are an exception. So most people just say, yeah, I just want the thing. And so I think that's got a major stumbling block in terms of the intention is cool. And the right to be forgotten, I think, is interesting. I mean, this whole thing about data and big data collection is interesting on loads of levels. When I talk about privacy and that kind of idea of them plugging, what you were talking about, there's sort of lots of different data points slowly building up a more and more robust picture of who you, Michael Forrest, or me, Vanka Magic, truly are and what we're interested in. That's kind of creepy. If on one level, but then me as a parent, I've got this whole extra layer of, so there are almost no pictures of my child on the open internet. There are a couple, and she's not tagged, or I'm not tagged, and she's not identifiable as my child. And because I think I as a parent have a right I have a duty to protect her from her identity being understood even before she's formed it. And even before and when later on she can choose how much of herself she divulges to the internet. At the moment, I'm sure the internet knows that I have a child.
I mean,
because now I've put it on a podcast and I've put it in a couple of articles, but I don't, I didn't really go, hey, look, here's the child that got born. I don't. So I think that there's that kind of level of data. How much about me? And the thing that most people will say is like, oh, it doesn't matter as long as you're not doing anything wrong. I don't mind how much they know about me, because then they can catch all the wrong uns. And we don't make our streets covered in cages because a couple of people might get mugged one day. Yeah. It's kind of just. It's a lot of this is because we can. And it's the same with plastic, with all these other things. At the moment we're going through why are you doing that? Because we can. Because we've got the technology.
I think something that I do, and this may be controversial, but something I do respect and appreciate about what Zuckerberg did with Facebook was he did want to let people look over the garden wall a little bit. Right, rather than having kind of everyone's in a private prison, locked off prison cell, try and open it up a little bit so that you can sort of look over someone's wall, see what they're doing, maybe sort of say hello. And I think that's one of the things that made it so compelling, was that you could, sort of in an opinionated, disruptive way, just kind of opened up that circle of what was acceptable to kind of let people see, and it took off in a big way. And there were lots of other social networks. So I really think a social network it's just what makes it take off is often just a subtlety of its configuration, of its design. And you can have some almost identical looking social networks, but one thing might be different that would make it super compelling over another. But yeah, that gives them a huge responsibility when they have all of this data. And even if it's, if it's all kind of, you've got all this control over your privacy and you can make this visible to these and this visible to these, the fact that you've still got all of that in your database and a bug in your code can leak 50 million private profiles and all of their messages without you even knowing necessarily is, that's a huge risk, and that's something you have to take a lot of responsibility for. And I can talk about this, my experience, firsthand. I have created an online service with that, for mental health, that asked you how you were and recorded your sort of diary of your kind of maybe quite innermost thoughts. And I found that very stressful, owning that data about people. Some of whom, because it was just me making something and kind of my friends were seeing it and maybe trying it, some of that, could have been my friends. So it was a lot of responsibility, and I was very hardline. I'm not going to look at this database, but it would be very easy to, if I was a different person, to just kind of go through it all and kind of find out an awful lot of stuff. And maybe people would think that they were being, clever about not saying it, but it might actually be more obvious than they might think. Which does remind me, the main thing about privacy to me traditionally has been, I don't really care if some stranger that I'm never going to meet finds out what porn I may or may not have looked at. It's if someone really close to me knows that, or all of my friends find out. That's the really scary bit. But what this Cambridge Analytica thing has exposed is that, we are now at a level where we can start manipulating people and changing things based on.
Fundamentally, we're all nosy about each other.
Yes.
And you have to be. To be human is to be nosy, really, and go, oh, what are they doing? And you're right. I mean, Facebook has created for whatever it hasn't done. For example, for me, who's got friends and relatives all over the world, it's very nice to be able to keep tabs on people without actually having to set aside time,
Read
phone them up.
Read a family newsletter
Or whatever. It's kind of nice, and you can interact with the different generations of the family, whereas before it might have been the mother sending a broadcast to everybody on a round robin letter. It's now, you can talk to the teenagers and the mother and the grandparents and everybody. So there is something nice about that feeling of connection. But then it's also this idea that it's free to use. And it's not free to use. You have paid for it with your data.
If you're not aware of the expression, listener, if the product is free, then, if something's free, then you're the product.
That's just it. And
that's just to remember that. Like, if you're not paying money...
You're paying something.
Yeah.
You are paying. And Zuckerberg has the right to... pay his employees and make a living. Whether he has the right to make bazillions is a different conversation. But if you've got a product idea and you have the right to earn a living from that product idea, is my belief. You spend time doing things, you should be rewarded. But if it's a good idea and people want it, those caveats aside. But if we are using these three things. We are using Google, we are using Facebook, we are using Twitter, we are using all these things that we're not paying for. We're giving them ourselves and our data, and we're giving them the right to, that thing where you go and look for some towels on one website and then you get to Facebook and there's an advert for those towels. that's the one.
Yes.
That's
you
one
will
of
never
those,
be allowed to forget that thing.
Oh my God.
But even just using Gmail, it's like now, I could host my own private email server, but Gmail's just got a nicer user interface, so I will sacrifice my privacy and let Google have all of my emails for 10 years, but longer, on their servers, to do with what they will, just because it's a bit easier. Like their website works a bit better than it would if I was doing my own one.
Yeah, and it's massively convenient for a small business to host your email through. If you need to knock up, a few different accounts, you don't need an administrator. You don't need, and that's more of a paid for service. But if it's kind of you've got to do the checks and balances, and all of the. But there is a positive flip side to big data. There truly is, in my view. So for somebody like me, and probably like you, who's been studying and thinking about user interfaces and how computers can help people and what software can do, for a very long time, the sort of panacea of the ultimate piece of software for everybody is this idea of the personal assistant. And you've got all these videos that are maybe now 20 years old of you walking into your house and kind of doing the "Hey Siri, wake me up in half an hour, would you?" In order for those digital assistants now, like for example, if you've created a calendar entry in your phone, then whether you've done it in Google Calendar or Apple Calendar or any other calendar, you can go, you should leave now because the location for your meeting is going to take you 15 minutes to get there if you walk. It can't do that if you don't give it data, and it isn't allowed to spy on you. Because it needs to know where you are now, where you need to be, how you normally travel, all those kind of things. So, but we have to find this. The missing element in all of this is the morals and ethics bit.
And this is what the EU's trying to do, but it's it can't move fast enough. Not that I want to reinforce this.
Well, I think the problem is a lot of these legislators don't understand technology.
Yeah, and I mean, these aren't geographically constrained things. Like, this is... You can have a law in one country, and so what?
I mean, the EU law covers anyone collecting data on EU citizens. So even if you're an American firm but you sell to EU citizens, you have to. I don't know how they're going to enforce it.
I mean, how do you enforce
any
of this? The trouble is the only people
know.
that can enforce a lot of this stuff are Facebook and Google.
I remember, because I watched the webinar in the week.
Okay.
Was that this week? Yes. I learned this. I do know the answer to this question from the lawyer person, is that basically, as a data controller, so if I am collecting data about you and then I want to put it into my Gmail or I want to put it into my ujima.com, I have
Ujima what now?
Whatever, I was trying to remember. I couldn't think of anything practical. My made-up.com tool that I want to use to spam you, I am responsible if they don't adhere to GDPR. So the law makes it so that basically if I trade in the EU and you want to trade with me, your product needs to adhere to the same GDPR rules. Otherwise, I'm going to get fined, and the fines are big. They're like 4% of annual turnover or 20 million euro, depending on which comes first. And it's, you know, they're big fines. But so basically they've legislated the supply chain. So sorry, American companies, you are going to have to do this if you want to trade with the EU. And I know there's only 60 odd million British people, but there's like 500 million EU people. And that is more than in America land. So it's a worthwhile market.
Well, it was a good idea to team up with them, wasn't it?
It was good.
I mean, it's a good idea, that, EU. Yeah, I really think it really solved a lot of problems that you don't even realise it was solving.
But going back to this idea that there are some positives in all of this, like, you know, there are no positives in the Cambridge Analytica thing. Don't get me wrong. That is evil. Yeah. Hopefully, this will be a trigger that solves loads of data problems. But, you know, in the same way that having Donald Trump as president of the United States of America is going to solve loads of problems just by people trying to get rid of him.
The thing about data is its natural state is to not be private. Its natural behaviour is to leak and be copied and copied over and over again. That's just the physics of data. So privacy control is you're actually trying to fight physics, and it's very hard to make something secure. It's harder to make something secure, and when developers are in trouble and they're on a deadline, the easiest thing sometimes to solve something is just to kind of, I'm just going to flip off that privacy, that security thing to get this bug working so that I can deliver tomorrow so I don't get in trouble. And because it's kind of invisible, like unless someone's really paying attention to every commit and, you know, all that, a commit is a change you made to some code with where you say what you wrote, but you could easily,
it's
you know, if someone
marriage.
wasn't paying attention. Yeah, it's not. It's just a little. I've committed a change to this code. The easiest thing to do when someone types in a password that they want to be their password would just be to save that as the password in a text field in the database. And that's a really bad thing to do because if someone gets the database, they can. And we know not to do that now. We maybe didn't know not to do that 20 years ago, 30 years ago. We were like, oh, yeah, it'll be fine. No one will ever find it. But the crazy thing about the internet is that anything that can happen will happen. It just will. There's no getting away from it. So we learned to hash our passwords, and then, you know, you'll have seen maybe that you have to have the little HTTPS padlock on a website anytime you're putting your password in, because in the old days, anyone in the same cafe as you could just sniff what your passwords are. If you happen to log in while they were there, they could just see your things going backwards and forwards because naturally it's open. Naturally, everything is just open. So we have to spot the weaknesses, spot the security flaws, and then deal with them as they emerge. And that's why we have these sort of bounty campaigns where, you know, they try and make it more tempting to hackers to, when they find a vulnerability or a data leak or something like that, to get paid lots of money to share it with someone like Google so that they can fix it, rather than trying to, sell all the data on the dark web. So yeah, that we are dealing with, we're fighting physics here, and it's very that's why this stuff will keep happening all the time. So, you know, for that reason, and the conclusion of that means you just need to, if you don't want something to be known, you just have to not put it there. Like if you don't send emails about what drugs you're buying, because that's just there. That's now just in a server, and it's been copied thousands of times across loads of different computers, and there's nothing you can do about it. And there's no such thing as deleting data. Like once it's existed, once it's been it's really, really hard to delete data once it exists, because of the way that computers copy data and back themselves up and replicate. It's just it's almost an absurd idea that you could then delete something that was now out there. Well, is anyone scared?
Which is that whole thing about the right to be forgotten.
Yeah.
Hello, Google. I'd like you to delete my account and delete all the information you hold on me. Thank you.
And the correct answer from Google there is, okay, well, we'll try.
Yeah. But the
It's
law
gonna
says that they must.
Yeah, but it's a lot of effort. It's like, okay, well, we've got tape backups. So we've got how do you even...
But you see, the good thing about this GDPR law is that it opens those conversations up. The intention must be there to do the right thing. And by the
absolutely.
right thing, I mean the non-evil thing, the not manipulating society to break it using data. That is what I mean by the right thing.
And I agree. So, and I'm just saying why it's so difficult and why stuff will keep happening.
On the subject of how we used to do things, I went to watch this documentary called Hacker Story. I will share the link to this because it's out and about. And I went with one of my friends who, and a mutual friend of ours actually got done for hacking into Harvard University a number of years ago. But the reason he was able to do that, because I'd never really heard or understood how and what he'd done. And apparently it was because at the time, this is 20 years ago, or more in fact, shit, I'm old.
Me too.
Basically, they were storing every failed password and username entry. So every time, where passwords, where you might go, oh, I've stuck a 1 at the end of my password, the servers were saving all those failed attempts. So you're eliminating loads of options.
And you know how easy. You know how easy that is to do as a programmer. I can't get my password form to work. I am going to just, in my logs, type what the password should be, and then I forget to delete that log message, and now that's just in plain text, replicated, just on the server for anyone that happens to manage to hack in, can get all of those logs of those things. And if I've just made a little, if people are this is why programmers shouldn't work late, because if you're a bit tired and you accidentally push some code and then forget about it, that is just logging out that, and you just wouldn't think of it for a second. And, I'm working on an app that basically, I've got to be careful I don't accidentally log out this mnemonic that you use to restore your Bitcoin wallet, because if that just ended up in the logs and someone sort of found a way to access those, they've just got everyone's money. Loads of people's money just from me. Like, if I'm a bit frazzled because I'm trying to meet a deadline and I'm tired,
and you've got a kidney stone.
Yeah, it's so easy to make that sort of mistake and you have to really understand what you're doing. So that's why we need to enforce all this stuff. Sorry, I'm just making it scary.
But it's all very technical, because earlier when you were talking about hashing passwords and then somebody in a cafe being able to sniff, I was like, ooh,
oh, sorry.
delicious smelling password hash. Does everybody need to understand? How much do people really need to understand?
The people don't. The government, the ruling, the people making the legislators need to know.
The church needs to understand this.
The church, the king needs to understand, and the queen. Not to sound like a mental crank.
Michael's holding his finger in the air in a bear with me kind of a gesture.
Not to sound like a crazy person, not to sound like an Alex Jones on your ass, but like when I was younger, I read about the singularity. If you don't know what that is, that's the rate of technology change, progress is accelerating, because the more advanced technology gets, the more it makes it easier to make further advances in technology. And that gets faster and faster, and we're seeing it every day. That's why things are going kind of crazy. And it's called a singularity because this rate of change just kind of goes up and up and up until it's just a straight line to infinity, and you cannot then make any predictions after that point in time about what the future is going to be like, because it's going to be different reality. Now, the idea with it, with us nerds, was always it was going to be like a robot uprising or an AI kind of catastrophe or, something like that where machine, Terminator, that kind of thing. But I think we're actually in the singularity now because it's happening at a political and influence level. It's happening on a societal level. And the reason I think this is happening is that the time now that it takes to come up with a manipulative idea like Cambridge Analytica did and executed on is significantly shorter than the time required for governments to react and adapt to that. And that means that by the time the government has caught up to the one scam, there will have been another 5. It will have changed. The landscape will have changed.
Yeah.
And it's going to change faster and faster, and and it's happening on a social level. And we're seeing that's why who could have predicted Trump? Who could have predicted a lot of this stuff? And it's happening because our ability to respond to change is now slower than the change itself. So we are kind of barreling towards that vertical line, and it's happening on a social level. And now principles and ideas and long-term trends just don't really mean anything anymore because we're in the middle of it.
So that's your theory?
Yeah, we could all be made of sausages. We could all be made of cheese sandwiches by next year. We could all have decided that we only talk to people with the same first name. We could all have decided. I don't know what we could have decided by next year.
But I don't know what we're deciding.
Oh so no, you'd have a.
I don't want to. Let's not make that true. I don't know how it's all going to catch up and how it's going. One of the things, I can't remember what we were talking about, and you talked about, humans that do use mobile phones and humans that don't use mobile phones. So it's like kind of like there's this sort of separation in society that it's not really around. Yes, there's the wealth thing, but that's a very, very small percentage of people up there in the wealth cloud with too much money. Yes. And then there's below that there are different spheres. So that are not to do with money, they're to do with the reality that you occupy. And there are too many realities at the moment. Maybe that's what it's like. There's no
that is it. Exactly.
It's like it's just how do you we're sort of in the same family, but we can't talk to each other because your reality and my reality are different, not because of money, but because of technology.
Yeah.
Goddamn technology. But you know what you were talking about earlier about your app that collects people's innermost thoughts and you making conscious decision not to read it. But that's morals and ethics. And how do you, in the olden days, and in some societies still, the church or whatever the equivalent is, policed the morals and ethics by providing, hell as punishment and heaven as reward, or cutting hands off or lashes or whatever the fuck is your version. Who now
flagellation.
Who can tell the Cambridge Analytica people that Alexander Nix dude, for example, who has the authority to say to him, you are evil, what you did is wrong, you cannot do that, hell. You are going to hell. What is the new version of hell? What are we offering as punishment for being evil?
I suppose it has to come from the private sector, doesn't it? I had a point to make about Google, about AI and Google, and like all this big data doesn't really mean anything until you have a consciousness that can try and make sense of it and connect it back to things. Maybe something like that. An actual God that we have created needs to be keeping an eye on us.
But have I told you about? I'm sure I've told you
Google
about that
God.
Game Paranoia.
Paranoia.
Yeah, it's a role-playing game where you sort of like the computer was programmed that we should all be happy, and then it became an act of a traitor to be unhappy, and then you got eliminated for being unhappy. So you have to be careful of that. But then if you think about what we were talking about last week with Maggie Bowden, that Dr. Maddie or Professor Maggie Bowden from Sussex, talking about the fact that AI is not going to reach human brain abilities just yet, for sure.
It's always a long way off.
It's always a long way off. So it will be a human brain that sits behind going, ha, now I know this. And I'm going to come up with Cambridge Analytica.
Well, that was the beauty of it. They just came up with, okay, we'll just do psychometric profiles and we can actually get a lot out of that data. So we don't really need all the other stuff. Anyway, we keep coming back to this. But it's going to be Google God, isn't it? Comes out.
It will be Google God or Amazon God. How's Amazon doing? They're just selling us things.
I think the people that are doing wrong know they're doing wrong.
Oh,
so
yeah.
even if you could just...
Well, they must do. They're not stupid.
Yeah.
They're just evil.
Yeah, and that's the difference. I mean, obviously you do have psychopaths who actually do... Well, I mean, they do lack empathy, and they probably are psychopathic. So, yeah, I mean... Although that guy that was, in the video...
The whistleblower.
Yeah. Is he a psychopath? Is he, did he seem evil? Because he was doing evil things.
People just don't think about the consequences of what they're doing, do they?
Well, you don't know what the consequences are going to be necessarily either. So you sort of try something.
It's like, let's manipulate... I don't know, in this instance. One of the things, and this is a story I may not want included...
Okay.
Because it's one of those things that still makes me feel bad hundreds of years later. One time, my brother and I let our cat catch a bird. And then we felt really, really... Because we were like, hey, come on, Eric, let's see.
I wonder if he
good.
can catch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then then Eric killed the bird, and then the bird had a partner that was out there, and it was just really sad and horrible, and I felt really bad. So this is why I may not want this on the internet. I meant to think a better story of learning about the consequences of your actions.
You can be blind to the evil if you're not thinking about that. If you're just thinking about trying to win, or if you're thinking
about making a living.
I think that's a really good metaphor example, though.
What, the killing the bird?
Yeah, I think that's because you can sort of put yourself in that. Oh, I hope. You're sort of excited that you might do this difficult
wow, look
thing.
Look at him going to do that. And then you're like, oh, God.
And then you're like, oh, no.
And it was like, what's that word? What's that book where the children turn evil? Lord of the Flies.
Yeah.
It was like that. It was me and my brother winding ourselves up. But there's a thing about... So at a level of somebody working in that organisation, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I'm willing to give them forgiveness, because I think if you're trying to earn a living or trying to become good at a thing, you can become blind to the consequences of something, because you don't have... There is an element of privilege to say, oh, no, I'm sorry, I'm not working on that project because it's evil.
I've sold cigarettes. Because it was a certain point in my career where it was an opportunity to sort of step up to the next thing, and I was like, okay. And then it wasn't, and then I accidentally ended up doing. But then the thing with that was the next cigarette project came on. I forgot that I was anti-cigarette and kind of ended up doing it. And I was like, I was supposed to refuse this time.
Yeah. So it can be very... the ability to refuse projects or be more picky is certainly something that I've been able to do for like last 10 years or so. Just go, no, I'm not working on that project because no. Or no, thank you for that offer, but I'm not coming to work for that firm. Thanks. And there is a strong element of privilege. So therefore, I don't think that I want to throw stones at the person in the video. I think the person to throw stones at is still the soulless fella at the top there.
But is he just trying to impress his dad? So
Well, this is my theory: is that his mummy and daddy just didn't give him enough kisses and cuddles when he was little. Because, I mean, look at him. He probably got packed off to boarding school when he was 2.5.
Well, he was at Eton, wasn't he?
Well, having been with a nanny since he was 3 days old, because mother cannot be disturbed at night.
I had a nanny. Maybe nannies are... Yeah, I had nannies.
Did you have a nanny?
Yeah,
That was because there were 55 of you.
Well, it's because my dad had to work, and it was the only option.
Yeah, but that's different to.
No, I know.
There's childcare,
good.
and then there's let's get a nanny in so we don't have to deal with the child crying. Delegate child rearing to people whose child it isn't. Which is also not,
I think nannies are the cause of all this. Nannies.
I don't think it's nannies. I think on the subject of child rearing, it is, children basically need a lot of love when they're little.
Greedy.
And they need love, they need feeding, and they need to be kept clean. It's very simple.
Fussy, greedy.
And so, but I don't believe that can be
needy.
That should be necessarily outsourced. But yes, that's what I think it is. I think that's his problem. He probably was trying to impress his mother and father, who packed him off to boarding school and then off to some all very expensive, best money could buy.
Yes, of course.
But with not enough kisses and cuddles, which has made him clearly a very, very...
Maybe he was getting kisses and cuddles from the wrong people at that boarding school.
But the point
maybe
is,
there was more.
I think they have absolutely created a leader. We just don't need those kind of ideas. Do it for something good.
I mean, I'll be interested to see how Zuckerberg... Has he actually responded properly yet?
I think he made some statement yesterday, but even though we were recording this episode today, I was very busy. I didn't have a chance to properly engage.
I haven't looked at it.
I think he said he's sorry.
Oh, cool. He's sorry for Trump.
He's sorry for wrecking the world.
Thanks, Mark. Good one. Cool. That solves it.
There was.
Can you?
Yeah. There was.
Why hasn't Twitter revoked Trump's account?
I don't know. I really don't know, because they don't have the balls. She says, using a very masculine phrase, but frankly, it's just fucking. It's.
Yeah. In conclusion,
everything's going to be fine.
In conclusion, like, nothing happens on its own. Even though it seems like technology is doing things by itself a lot of the time, nothing happens without lots of people doing a lot of work. And so Wikipedia doesn't just magically correct errors. There are teams of lots of people every day keeping an eye on it and working on it. So we need to work, and we need to be vigilant, and we can't really relax.
No. Stay paranoid.
And don't confuse chatting on Facebook with chatting face to face, because there is a world of difference. Like, it might emotionally seem like the same thing, but it's really not, because that data wants to get out, and it will probably find a way.
There's something about, like, why should I have to worry about this? No, maybe I'm not. So my first thing is like, look, I want to chat to my friend in the other side of the world on Messenger, have a little chat, have a little video call. Oh, it's so easy and simple. Or WhatsApp, which is Facebook, contrary to what lots of people think.
Yes.
And
as is Snapchat.
And lots of other, and Instagram.
Yes.
So I want to chat. Why should I have to worry about somebody doing something evil? Shouldn't there be moral core?
Shouldn't there be laws about this sort of thing?
Shouldn't be the United Nations? What's their role in all of this? If they're going to stop war, or if they were formed to prevent us ever descending into world war again, maybe it's time the UN stepped up. Maybe this is about legislating. Maybe it all comes back always to politics. But then, if you were telling your friend a secret in a cafe, you might, well, I would, just have a quick look to see who's around. It's like, who's nearby and are they paying attention? You kind of need to develop that over-the-shoulder look for the internet. That's it. I always love to look for a non-internet analog, analogy, not analog, non-internet analogy. And the non-internet...
An analog analogy.
Yes, an analog analogy would be a quick, is there anyone behind that shoulder? Is there anybody behind that shoulder? Does anyone look like they're listening to our conversation? Anyway, let me tell you what I heard the other day. That's what you got to adopt.
I mean, you just can't ever know what's going on behind the scenes. So, just don't be silly. I don't like saying that. Thanks for listening.
Thanks
That
for
was our
listening.
thing. What can people do if they like the podcast?
They can go on iTunes and write us some reviews, or Apple Podcasts, as I think it's now known.
Well, I think it's actually called iTunes. Sorry, I mean Apple Podcasts. I think that's its official name at the moment for at least a year. You can find me at Michael Forrest on Twitter and michaelforrestmusic.com.
You can find me at Ivanka on Twitter. I've got this blog that I sometimes do things with called ivanka.blog.
And then we've got a website of the podcast that I just kind of updated a bit last week, and it's a bit ropey, but I'll fix it, at grandpodcast.com. And you can email us hello@grandpodcast.com with your ideas.
Oh, and you can Twitter us at podcastgrand.
There's going to be YouTube. It's going to be, I mean, it's all kicking off. Ivanka's driving it up. So thanks for listening, and hopefully see you next week. Let us know what you think. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.